American Pickers star Mike Wolfe has finally spoken out about his relationship with Frank Fritz, and it's not a pretty picture. Fans have been speculating for years that he and Frank had a falling out, but now shocking new details have come to light, and it gets worse. Frank's breakup with his fiancée Diane Banks has only made things worse. What really happened between them, and why is Mike breaking his silence now? Stay tuned, because this story is messier than you think. Born in Davenport, Iowa, he spent his childhood combing through flea markets, garage sales, and stale store basements, interested in the history hidden in things that other people thought were junk. Frank, on the other hand, saw untold stories, and his desire to find out every detail became the driving force of his life. Meanwhile, Mike Wolfe, who was only a year younger, chased a similar dream. He searched through empty barns, storage units, and roadside dumps, saving relics from oblivion. If an old bicycle frame or vintage sign seemed useless to some, in their small town, where hunting for rusted memorabilia wasn't a common weekend activity, Frank and Mike were both outsiders. Despite what most people think, they didn't become best friends right away. Their paths often crossed, but each was focused on making something real out of this strange hobby. Frank went the traditional route and became a fire inspector in Iowa for 25 years. At work, he found even more hidden gems by visiting old firehouses and commercial buildings full of people had long forgotten about Mike's other goals. He wanted to bring the thrill of picking to a national stage. He knew that pitching a reality show would be risky, so he spent years filming his backroads adventures to get enough material to convince a network that America needed to see their world. After almost endless rejections, the History Channel finally said yes, and in 2010, American Pickers was born. The show captured something magical: two personalities, one flashy and full of ideas, and the other calm and lust. The show was about digging through dusty barns and finding valuable Americana. Mike Wolfe led the story with big ideas about brand expansion and deals, and Frank Fritz brought a relatable warmth to the characters. Their chemistry lit up the screens, drawing viewers along on their exciting hunts across the country. But outside of work, Frank struggled silently with Crohn's disease, a debilitating condition that left him worn out. He dealt with it by smiling through the pain, often missing chunks of Mike, kept going with his plans to make what he had started even bigger. They worked well together, and the show became a huge hit, making them both household names. But Diane Bankson, who Frank had known for years and whose on and off relationship had a bigger effect on his emotions than anyone thought, was always there in the background. As American Pickers got going, Frank and Diane's unstable relationship started to fall apart behind closed doors, but neither the producers nor the viewers saw it. No one knew how bad things were getting. At this point, everything seemed set up for success. Two Midwest pickers had become unlikely celebrities by saving old things from decay and charming audiences. But no one saw the storm brewing behind the scenes, which was caused by Frank's quiet health problems, personal demons, and unstable love story with Diane Bankson. Soon, the facade of harmony would fall, and secrets would flood into the spotlight, making the Pickers famous. Captivated, the idea of turning dusty barns into gold mines was new, interesting, and addicting. Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz were the perfect pair. Mike had a lot of energy and was eager to make deals, while Frank had a more laid-back personality that made him seem like everyone's friendly neighbor. Together they roamed rural roads, pulling antiques from decades of debris. With success came a strict schedule. Filming took weeks at a time, and each episode required hours of travel and on-camera interaction. Producers pushed them hard. It worked, their fan base exploded, and all of a sudden these small-town Iowa pickers were famous across the country. They made public appearances, autograph sessions, and interviews, but looks can be deceptive. Behind Frank's friendly smile were battles. He dealt with the painful symptoms of Crohn's disease, which left him tired and in pain most of the time. When he wasn't on set, he was either recovering or getting ready for another flare-up, while the show hid his absences to keep the momentum going. Colleagues talked behind Frank's back about the problems he was having, balancing his health needs with the needs of the show. Nothing too public, but in the middle of all this chaos, Diane Bankson became his private escape. They had known each other for years and felt like a second home to him. But Diane wanted stability. Not a crazy life with a TV star. She found it hard to see Frank push himself to meet filming schedules, especially when his health was getting worse and his stress level rose. Despite the chaos, Frank proposed to Diane in 2017. He wanted a real partner who could help him stay grounded while juggling fame and illness. He bought a house in Iowa in the hopes that they could make a life for themselves away from the spotlight. But the stress of the show and long separations made it hard for them to keep their love alive. For viewers, Frank and Mike were unstoppable. They were the Pickers' unstoppable friends who turned rust into riches. The show went on, but behind the scenes, Mike's constant drive for bigger deals and Frank's growing health problems were causing cracks. Diane was caught in a whirlwind of high-stakes TV production, Frank's personal problems, and her own desire for a more normal life. Behind the scenes, tension started to bubble over into small arguments over scheduling money and whose antiques would take center stage. Frank, who was in pain, also felt overshadowed by Mike's big personality, according to people close to them. Arguments were becoming more common and emotionally charged, and the public was aware of the rising drama. Fans flocked to see these two, and ratings and merchandise sales went through the roof. No one could have predicted the breakdown that was about to happen. As the pressure mounted, so did Frank's health issues, and Diane's role in his life took a dark turn. Soon, secrets that had been kept secret in the Iowa countryside would come to light in public, leading to explosive accusations and ultimately, a heartbreak that no one could ignore. Health problems and hidden struggles. Behind the bright lights of his TV success, Frank Fritz was in a pocket leak. On camera he tried to look calm and happy, but Crohn's disease rarely gave him a moment of true peace. Off camera he had to deal with crippling fatigue and abdominal pain. Traveling across the country for American pickers made things worse, pushing his body to the limit. Stress built up, leading to an unhealthy habit of drinking to relax. At first it was manageable. Maybe a few drinks to unwind after a long day of filming. But as the show's demands grew and personal problems piled up, so did the drinking. Diane saw it and begged him to slow down and find healthier ways to deal with his problems, but Frank couldn't seem to break the cycle. Things got even worse in 2018 when Frank reportedly bought Diane an expensive ring to make their engagement official. On the surface it looked like a fairy tale, a famous reality TV star found love. But behind the happy pictures, Diane said she caught Frank with another woman. Frank said Diane betrayed him first. The story was messy for everyone involved. Every part of Frank's life was affected by this explosive dynamic. On set, rumors spread that he was distracted and moody, often isolating himself. Mike Wolfe noticed the change but didn't know how to help. The show's producers kept filming, hoping that Frank's personal problems would go away, but they got worse. Diane sued Frank for negligence with fireworks, which was an alarming claim. She said that Frank and a friend were trying to light a firework. When it didn't work, they allegedly left it there without telling her. Diane later said she tried to use the ashtray, which caused an explosion that severely burned her hand and arms. She lost eyebrows, eyelashes, and other injuries. Frank denied this story, blaming his friend. The lawsuit became a media scandal, with tabloids loving the headlines. Frank Fritz's fiancée sues him over fireworks accident. Suddenly, the likable antiques fan was seen in a harsher light. Diane eventually dropped the lawsuit, which added to the mystery. Some thought it was a private settlement, while others thought she just wanted to avoid the legal battle. However, the damage to Frank's public image was already done. Behind every argument and shocking revelation was the truth. Frank was spiraling. His health was getting worse, his relationship with Diane was falling apart, and his partnership with Mike Wolfe was in danger. Fans continued to watch the show, blissfully unaware of the chaos going on behind the scenes. The curtain went up, but cracks don't stay hidden for long. It wouldn't be long before Mike Wolfe finally broke his silence on Frank Fritz. Once that door opened, it couldn't be closed again. The showdown with Mike Wolfe. While Frank Fritz dealt with his own problems, another chasm opened in his longtime partnership with Mike Wolfe. The two had made American Pickers a hit, but growing tensions threatened to tear them apart. Fans noticed Frank's irregular appearances. The official line was that he was sick. But, as the months went by, rumors spread that Frank was quitting because he was tired of working with Mike Wolfe. Wolfe posted hints about new picks and destinations, but he rarely mentioned Frank by name. Finally, Wolfe said that Frank was leaving for good. His farewell message was short and almost impersonal. After 10 years of roadside negotiations, big laughs, and brotherly camaraderie, fans were expecting something deeper. Instead, it felt like a corporate memo. In interviews, Frank accused Mike of leaving him. Frank said that Mike never called, checked in, or offered a lifeline. From Frank's point of view, the friendship only existed in front of the camera. Behind it, Mike wasn't interested in making things right. The public took sides, with some blaming Frank's personal problems and others criticizing Mike for seeming cold. Inside sources said that Mike felt torn. On the one hand, he was building a brand that went beyond the show, with stores, merchandise, and social media additions. On the other hand, he knew Frank's presence was important, but he also couldn't ignore Frank's unstable behavior and frequent absences. Sponsors, network executives, and production schedules don't always allow for real-life problems. It all came to a head when Frank went off script and called Mike a traitor. He said their friendship was mostly a mirage, which shocked loyal fans who had thought they had a real friendship. Behind that facade, deals were made, fortunes were at stake, and personal loyalties got tangled with business interests. As the fight got worse, Frank's life fell apart even more. The lawsuit with Diane Bankson, the alleged cheating scandal, and his worsening health problems were too much for anyone to handle on their own. But Mike Wolfe mostly kept quiet, focusing on the show's new direction. That's when private conversations started to get out. Mike had told close friends that Frank's real downfall wasn't just the drinking or the missed episodes. It was what he did to Diane. In one very raw moment, Mike admitted he thought Frank had made Diane said that. Mike said he killed her when he saw Frank in a compromising situation with another woman, meaning that his choices had destroyed the relationship so completely that the woman who could have saved him was no longer there. Those words would soon send shockwaves through Frank's circle. They showed how deeply Mike felt Frank had sabotaged the only relationship that really mattered off-screen. While the public had seen tension between the co-hosts, they hadn't seen this level of. It was impossible to avoid a dark turn in the story about Frank Fritz after Mike's statement got out. There was a lot of speculation about what Mike Wolfe really meant when he said he killed her, and fans were debating what he meant. In the end, it became clear that Mike wasn't actually accusing Frank Fritz of a crime, but rather that he saw Frank's betrayal, addiction, and emotional recklessness as killing any chance for a successful future with Mike. Diane Bankson, close friends, said that Mike was almost crying when he said it. He'd seen Frank spiral into a failing relationship, weighed down by accusations of cheating on both sides. Diane had been the only stable force that could have pushed Frank toward better decisions, consistent medical treatment, more responsible habits, and a calmer life. Once Diane was gone, Frank was left without Diane. Without her, Frank's bad choices got worse. He sank deeper into erratic behavior that made things worse. The fireworks lawsuit was just one clear example of Frank's carelessness. Even after Diane dropped the suit, the emotional and social fallout continued. That tragedy left Frank in a worse position with fewer supporters. Fans only saw glimpses of Frank. The show kept going with Mike's new guests and picks, and Frank's presence got weaker, until it was completely gone. Online forums were filled with confusion. Why was everyone so crazy? Where was Frank? Why had he lost so much weight? There was a lot of talk on social media about Mike's ominous words. Some thought they were harsh criticism of Frank's character, while others saw them as an expression of heartbreak or even pity. Diane, on the other hand, refused to be called a helpless victim. She publicly stated she had her own reasons for leaving, and she wouldn't let Frank paint her as the bad guy. What no one could deny was that Frank and Diane were dating. Frank's actions ended a love that could have been his lifeline, according to Mike. A heartbreak of that magnitude doesn't go away slowly. And for Frank, it would cast a long shadow on everything else that would happen. As realities fell apart, Frank Fritz's life took a sharp turn for the worse, as health problems caught up with him. His Crohn's disease got worse, and rumors about him drinking too much wouldn't go away. Fans noticed his friends' official statements were vague and offered platitudes about his health and privacy. But the truth was much worse than anyone dared to admit in public. In July 2022, Frank had a massive stroke that left him fighting for his life. His friends, co-workers, and family were shocked, and even people who had supported Mike Wolfe in their feud felt a pang of concern. For a moment, the drama about show contracts, lawsuits, and old grudges took a back seat to real life. Diane Bankson, who was once the woman he wanted to marry, was nowhere to be seen in his hospital room. Their divorce was final and was mired in legal battles. Diane's lack of empathy was overshadowed by the harm she said Frank did to her. This lonely reality emphasized Mike's haunting words about Frank's ultimate mistake. However, Mike did show up at the hospital quietly and without a fuss, even though they had a public fight that he couldn't ignore. Years of shared road trips, laughter, and a partnership that used to define both of their lives made Mike's visits somber. He spoke softly, reminding Frank of better times and letting him know he still cared. Unfortunately, Frank's recovery was not easy. He had severe neurological effects from the stroke and needed constant medical supervision. The monthly costs rose to what was said to be tens of thousands of dollars. A court-appointed guardian took over. His care was decided by a financial institution, and his empty bank accounts were managed. It was a cruel turn for someone who used to feel free to roam the highways looking for hidden treasures. Meanwhile, Diane started a new relationship and let time dull the pain of past betrayals. She was done with lawsuits and any hopes of reconciliation. To her, the man she once loved had changed into someone she couldn't recognize, and she needed to protect her own peace. Fans cried out for a redemption arc. If you're not careful, real life doesn't always end happily. Frank had a hard time in rehab, Mike was dealing with guilt, and there were no camera crews or heartwarming ending scenes. There were just three people picking up broken pieces that no one would want. Frank Fritz's last years were filled with health problems, legal battles, and betrayals from friends and family. He was fired from American Pickers in 2020, and his Crohn's disease got worse. After a back surgery in 2022 that left him with 185 stitches and metal rods in his spine, Frank was physically disabled. After the stroke, and the court appointing a guardian, Frank was unable to take care of himself or make decisions about his life and finances. At first there was a glimmer of hope. Reports said Frank was able to speak with great effort again, but his mobility remained a problem. An insider said that while he had the drive to talk, physical therapy felt like an impossible mountain. Some of his closest friends tried to cheer him on, but the fire that used to define him had gone out. During it all, one name was missing: Diane Bankson. She was the woman who had once stood by him and planned to marry him, but she was nowhere to be found. If she knew about his condition, she didn't say anything public and didn't even mention him by name. Whatever they had shared before was buried under years of anger and lawsuits. While Diane was quiet, Mike Wolfe talked about Frank Fritz, but it was different now. The anger had grown. Mike had avoided talking about Frank's death for years, keeping his distance as their once thriving relationship fell apart, but the stroke changed everything. When Frank was at his weakest, Mike spoke out. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he asked fans to stop the drama and pray for Frank. "Now is not the time to set the record straight," he wrote. "Frank has suffered a stroke and is in the hospital. Please keep him in your hearts and thoughts." Mike's words hinted at what was to come. For the first time in a long time, Mike reached out to Frank. In the last few months of Frank's life, they would have one last moment of reconciliation and say goodbye. Frank Fritz's last few months were a slow, painful decline. He used to be known for his never-ending energy and sharp wit, but now he needed caregivers to stay alive. Confined to an assisted living facility, Frank had trouble with physical therapy at times, and showed signs of improvement at other times. Then, on October 1, 2024, the news came out that Frank Fritz had died at the age of 60. Mike Wolfe confirmed the death. After years of tension, silence, and unresolved conflicts, Mike told the world the news. It was clear from his words that Frank's death hurt him deeply, no matter what their relationship was like in the past. "It's with a broken heart that I share with all of you that Frank passed away last night," Mike wrote. "I've known Frank for more than half my life, and what you saw on TV is exactly what I saw. A dreamer who was both sensitive and funny," he went on. "We've been on a lot of trips together and logged a lot of miles. I feel lucky to have been there with him on his last trip home. I love you, buddy, and I know you're in a better place." Fans had been wondering for years if the two would ever talk again, if they would ever rebuild the friendship that made American Pickers famous. And now, at the end, they had. According to reports, Mike visited Frank over Memorial Day weekend and had an emotional talk with him. It was their first real moment of closure in years. No more lawsuits, no more career rivalries, just two old friends having one last conversation. But Diane Bankson never said a word. Some people thought she might get in touch with him after Frank's stroke, but she never did. She had moved on. While Frank struggled in his last years, Diane rebuilt her life, starting a new relationship and leaving the past behind. She had been through too much, and whatever connection they once had was broken, destroyed by lies, lawsuits, and charges that neither could. Maybe that was the real tragedy. Did Mike Wolfe do the right thing by coming out, or was it too late? Let us know what you think below. Please subscribe for more shocking news. Thanks for watching this movie with us.